So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys some clips from an interview that Ben Meiselas did with a former Maga leader by the name of Rich Logis. I highly recommend you go check out the entire video. They're going to be doing a series of videos with Rich. The first video is called Former Maga Leader Becomes Trump's Worst Nightmare. Be sure to look it up here on YouTube. I found this to be very interesting because Rich talks about his time in MAGA, what led him to MAGA, and why it's so hard to walk away. And I think anytime that someone walks away from this, we need to give them a microphone, and we need to get an understanding of how they got caught up in all of this, because so many of us have lost family and friends to this. It truly is like a cult, and I feel like when I'm watching these types of interviews, and I mean no disrespect to Rich when I say this, but I can't help but feel like we're watching Jonestown survivors talking about how they got sucked in. And in this first clip I want to show you, he talks about how there was a time that he would have never sat down with Ben or Midas Touch. So let's take a look at this, and then we're going to talk more about it.
It's a little surreal to hear you introduce me about coming to collaborate with you guys here at Midas Touch Network. When I was in MAGA, if I had met you and anyone at the Midas Touch team, I'd have said, just like what Trump said about Republicans for Harris, these guys are the existential enemies against all of us in MAGA. So as part of our working together, I want people to know that the kind of content we're going to create here, we're going to bring some joy, we're going to bring some hope, but a lot of what we talk about is going to be some of my own experiences from the inside, trying to help Americans understand why their friends and family fell prey to MAGA in the right wing, why they're still in the thrall of it, and some of the work that we're going to do to empower people to leave and try to mend ties and reconcile with their friends and family. So I'm really honored. It's very unlikely for me to be joining all of you, but I'm here to do my part in trying to resolve and remedy some of the ills that I have caused from my time in MAGA.
First of all, I just want to say that I absolutely admire Rich for having the guts to come forward and say this. And you heard him right there say that in MAGA, they feel like we're the enemy of the people. And what have we been hearing so much from MAGA here lately is, don't call Trump a threat to democracy, because if you do, that's going to turn up the temperature in the room. But they literally believe that we are the enemy of the people. And we have heard Trump call us the enemy of the people. He's called Harrison Walls the enemy of the people. He said that we needed to be rooted out like vermin. And now there's someone who used to work within the MAGA movement that is saying all the things that we've been saying and validating what we're saying. So I know a lot of people think a lot of times we're being hyperbolic about things, but there was proof right from someone who was once in the movement saying, yeah, we were led to believe that you guys were the absolute enemy of the people. And in this next clip, he talks about how he got sucked into MAGA. And this is a story that I've heard so many times, and I think we really need to pay attention to it. Take a look.
I look back on my life every day. I wish I could go back in time and change my votes and my decisions. I was neither a Republican nor a Democrat before Trump ran in 15, 16. I thought the two parties were the same. I thought that the political system overall would benefit from being obliterated and rebuilt. And so when Trump ran, even though he ran as a Republican, that was a lot of his brand as a candidate. He came in and said that the politicians have failed us. They don't represent us. Let's take a flamethrower to this system. Let's change the ways. And though I wasn't immediately enamored with the campaign, I found myself nodding along in agreement quite often. And it was very early in 16 when I decided to just jump headfirst into the campaign. I was working as a volunteer. I helped write part of the call script. In fact, the line that I contributed into the call script was, "Let's make history and elect Trump."
I think that's actually more common than people realize. I remember talking to a guy, and I really thought a lot of the dude. He was a good guy until you started talking politics with him, and then you would be in a heated disagreement pretty quick. But one day I finally got him to crack, and he said to me, "Brandon, listen, I don't like the guy. I never liked the guy. But I was just so sick and tired of the system. I was so sick and tired of Democrats and Republicans, and he was preaching this message that the whole system was bad and he was going to drain the swamp." And I said to myself, you know what? Just let him have it. Just let him burn the whole thing to the ground, and maybe we can start over. And you know what? I didn't have that mentality back then, but I can see why people did, because I remember having arguments with my uncle over Bernie Sanders. I was going to vote for Bernie, and my uncle was behind Hillary Clinton, and he was like, "Why are you getting behind Bernie?" And I said, "Well, because we saw Bushes and Clintons in the White House my entire life. I would like to see something different." So I understand the sentiment of wanting to see something different. I just never understood wanting to burn it all to the ground and start over, because if you burn it all to the ground, there's going to be a lot of innocent people that's going to be affected and hurt by that. So I've never really understood that mentality, but I really believe that that's way more common than people may realize. A lot of people did start with him because he was something different. They were tired of the system. And like I've said so many times, a lot of them weren't even in the political arena, but they felt welcomed in all of a sudden to like, oh, I can make a change here. We'll give it to this guy who's neither Democrat or Republican. I mean, yeah, he's running as a Republican, but we'll give it to this outsider, and this outsider will be able to shake things up and drain the swamp. That's not how it worked at all. All he did was empower the swamp and made it worse. But I do believe a lot of people started with Trump that way. And in this last clip I'm going to show you today, and I look forward to the videos that he and Ben makes in the future. But in this last clip today, he talks about why it's so hard for some to walk away from MAGA. I think this is really powerful, and you need to hear it. Take a look.
I will mention this so many times in the coming many months of us working together, that MAGA is a community. And one of the reasons it was so difficult for me to leave, and it's one of the reasons it's going to be difficult for others to leave, is that when you are so invested in a community, not just financially, but it's part of your being, it's part of your identity, walking away from that is really frightening. And so, yes, we are going to make an appeal to those with friends and with family who are in MAGA, who feel like they're never going to have the kinds of relationships again that they had before Trump came on the political scene. But a lot of, Ben, what we do also is going to be for MAGA Americans themselves, because it is my belief, and it's the wager that I'm making, that over time, I think it's happening actually right now, albeit probably a bit more quiet, but I think that it's going to happen over time, where more and more who are in MAGA are going to start to have those doubts, and they're going to start to question their support. But if they don't have a new place to go, it makes it less likely that they will leave, even if they know that they should. So that's why leaving MAGA, really, we are creating a community to counter the toxic community of MAGA.
You know, I can understand how that something can become a community, and once you're a part of it, it's really hard to walk away. As someone who has battled addiction, and I know that this is kind of a jump for a comparison here, but the hardest part about kicking addiction is getting away from the people that you once were surrounded with. And a lot of times you're afraid to leave. A lot of times you're also afraid of the judgment that's going to be passed on you when you do. You're afraid of what others will say, and you're afraid of how you will fit in with other people. So I can relate to that to some extent, because I do remember a time in my life having to walk away from certain groups of people and certain places that I used to hang out in, and going, okay, now how am I going to fit in this new environment, and how are people going to take to me? It's really sad that there are people out there that's in this movement, and they may be having thoughts of walking away, but they're afraid of what will happen when they step outside of it. And I would say one of the main reasons they're afraid to walk outside of it, if the truth was told, is because they see just how people that turns on Trump gets treated. They see how that people outside the MAGA movement gets talked about, and a lot of people cannot stand to be criticized or talked about that way. I know so many people who probably are sitting there on the fence with this guy, or like this guy, at one point going, I just really don't believe this. When they look over at people who they respect and they have, admiration for, and they see that person speaking up, I think a lot of times they're thinking, yeah, I would love to walk away from this, but I saw how people were treated that did walk away. That's why I say it's more important to speak up and talk about things. And I understand that not everybody's in a position to sit here and create content like I do, but you can share videos, you can pass them around, you can not shy away from the conversations at work, you can not shy away from the conversations around the dinner table, because I think a lot of times what sucked them into this movement, like he said, was this feeling of community and feeling like they belong to something. And I think it's very important to remind them that once they walk away from MAGA, and they start hanging around reasonable people, and they start hanging around people who are compassionate and caring and aren't all about cruelty, then they'll understand that it's a much better part of the world to be associated with, and they will realize that it's okay that to once upon a time get sucked into something. And they'll learn on our side of the fence that if you disagree with the leader, you can say so. We don't have to come up with catchphrases like, let's go Brandon. You know, if we have a problem with Joe Biden, we can say it out loud. If we have a problem with Kamala Harris, we can say it out loud. That's why that I always talk about, you know, being on the left, being progressive, and being liberal. The word liberal simply means you're open-minded and willing to change. And I've always said that I do vote Democrat right now. I voted Democrat straight down the line my whole life. But there could come a day if the Democrats begin to go in a direction that I didn't agree with, and they had some cult of personality come up who was just taking the party in a direction I didn't believe in. And if the Republicans was no longer MAGA, and suddenly I saw that they were reasonable people on that side of the aisle, I wouldn't have a problem walking away, because that's what reasonable people do. So I think if people would encourage more people to go ahead, come out, say it's okay, you can walk away from it. I'm sure you've heard us roasting MAGA before, but you got to stop and ask yourselves, why were we doing it? That's the thing that I would say to them. If you're like, well, you guys roasted us too. Yeah, well, why were we doing it? That's the questions you got to ask, because if we were pointing out that he wanted to be a dictator on day one, that's something that should have been a red flag to you to start with. And if we're pointing out he wants to terminate the Constitution, that should have been a red flag to start with. And if we're pointing out January 6th, we can bring the receipts and show you what happened. And if we're pointing out the fact that he was found liable of sexual abuse and defame the victim, you saw him do all those things. We were just trying to point out his behavior, and we weren't going to allow it to be normalized. So a lot of times you got to stop and ask yourself, if you say, well, you guys really ridiculed us too, we were ridiculing his ideas, and we were ridiculing the people that were wearing the merch and standing with it and coming up with all the cruel and hateful rhetoric. You know, there's a lot of people that jumped on the Trump train and bought into it because of flags like fuck your feelings. They loved that. They loved being able to like walk around. It made them feel like they were somebody. It empowered them. It gave them a purpose. It gave them a voice. And if you take Trump away, they're afraid of having that voice without him, because our side doesn't have a leader. You have to think for yourself. You're allowed to think for yourself. We're not sitting here, look, we don't all bow to Kamala Harris. We don't all bow to Tim Walz or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or George Soros or whoever else they think that we bow to. We don't. So the freedom of being on this side of the aisle is getting to think for yourself, getting to speak out against this side if you want to. And, you know, you save a ton of money on merch, I'll tell you that. If you come on over to our side, you're going to save a ton of money, because we don't grab every cliche that comes along and try to profit off that. And we've never tried to sell Bibles. We've never tried to sell sneakers. We've never set autographed flags. I mean, how disrespectful has he been? And again, when we point those things out, it's us ridiculing his ideas and just the glaring hypocrisy of supporting those kind of ideas. Because to say you're an American and say that you're all for democracy, but yet you support that, you can't have it both ways. You can't be for Donald Trump and then say that you put America first, because you're not putting America first. You have to put Trump first to be in MAGA. So I'm looking forward to more videos that Ben does with Rich, and I hope to see more people start to walk away, and hopefully someone like Rich will inspire them to go, you know what? You know, he walked away, I can do it too. And they'll see the conversations he has with Ben. They'll realize that Ben's going to be compassionate and reasonable, and he's not going to sit there and belittle and mock and make fun of Rich, because that's not the type of people we are. So hopefully this gets around, and I highly recommend you watch Ben's video. Again, it was former MAGA leader becomes Trump's worst nightmare. Share that video with your friends. Share this one with your friends, and let them know it's okay to walk away from that cult. So, folks, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. I always enjoy sitting down here talking with you guys. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you're notified when I make new content. And if you haven't already, go over and check us out on Patreon. We're pumping more content on there. We've expanded our tiers. I appreciate you guys so much for supporting what I do, and you guys have a great week.